What does the UK need to do to make itself more food secure, as they say, to ensure that we can all still eat in a future that looks increasingly dicey in the conflicts, floods, droughts, pandemics that might be coming our way? Well, let me tell you three stories. Three stories about three food producers, the finalists in this year's BBC Food and Farming Awards. The stories came out of your nominations and the judging trip I then made with the chef, TV star, campaigner and head of judges Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, beginning in Yorkshire, going northwest to Cumbria and then south to Cambridgeshire. It was a trip full of pleasures, but the backdrop was always there, set out on the food programme earlier this year. Professor Tim Lang had just published his report on food security. The report was commissioned by Lord Toby Harris. He's the first person you'll hear in this extract. Then Tim Lang and Henry Dimbleby, author of the National Food Strategy, commissioned and then almost entirely ignored by the last government.
We're in a very unstable time in terms of geopolitics. We're probably closer to widespread war than we have been for more than 60 years. What we've also seen is the use of grey zone tactics by some governments to undermine others by causing disruption, by causing problems, and that could easily include problems with our food supply system.
If there is a plan, I couldn't find it. And more importantly, I interviewed people who would know. I started getting a picture of very different sorts of shocks that need to be considered for, and different types and sources of those shocks. But overwhelmingly, the feedback that I got from my many, many interviews is there is no plan.
The first thing that I would like to see is the building in of statutory targets on food in terms of what level of production we want here, and similar to the Climate Change Committee, to have an independent body that holds the government to account. This is a multi-generational, multi-term of parliament problem, and you need to have that kind of structure. I think there is an opportunity to have a horticulture strategy in this country where we produce more. That would also be good for our GDP, be good for our prosperity.
Since then, reports reinforcing all that Professor Tim Lang wrote have been arriving regularly. Not long ago, industry stepped in with the head of food at Marks & Spencer publicly and forcefully warning the government that they need to set a legally binding target to increase the proportion of food produced at home. So what, you might ask, has one veg grower, one baker and one cheesemaker, maturer, seller got to do with it? Well, let's begin with the cheese. Near Settle in North Yorkshire, and a come hither sign within a collection of farm buildings at Crow's Nest Barn.
Here we are standing outside Courtyard Dairy. Tantalising glimpses of enormous wheels of cheese just through the glass there.
It says follow your nose.
Now that you open the door, I can really smell cheese.
Inside, towers of cheese wheels, cut and uncut, stretch across a long counter. One bit of it's slate, the one that's been there since Courtyard Dairy founders Kathy and Andy Swinscoe began the business 15 years ago.
We couldn't even afford refrigeration in those days, so we bought this cheese counter, did like 20 cheeses, raw milk traditional cheese, and it's grown from there really. We'd quite like to keep this here because it's got that bit for me. You can build this whole place from that bit of slate really.
In the cheese-making room, Kathy is cutting curds for Calixta, a European mountain cheese recipe she adapted. It's made with raw milk from a nearby organic farm.
Yes, this is our main hard cheese. This has a bit of continental methodology in it, really because we do so much trying to work with traditional British cheeses and trying to reinvigorate them, and we've done so much for reinvigorating like Wensleydale and Lancashire. We want to do something that would sit very different to those cheesemakers that we support in our region. Yeah. And so we made something completely different style of texture, completely different style of make.
So we could still sell a lot of Wensleydale, but make our own cheese that could sit happily on the counter.
The great thing about this as well, we are like a little small family business, and so this whole cheesemaker was designed so that it's fast and uses a lot more heat than you get in British cheeses, but it allows us to put our kids on the bus in the morning when they go to school.
It's essentially a lifestyle cheese.
It's a lifestyle cheese, yeah.
So while the curds are stirred, we head downstairs for some tea and curd tarts made by Bethan at the on-site bakery from Way, left over from the cheese making. The sort of utterly delicious pastry that reminds you how foolishly little we celebrate our best traditional foods. But setting that aside, Andy explains why the Courtyard Dairy runs seminars on many different aspects of cheesemaking.
If you write a recipe, as you know, the actual fact of doing it is nothing like learning it from somebody who knows what they're doing. And in fact, one of our cheesemakers found this booklet, which was pictures, like old-fashioned pictures of Wensleydale cheesemakers. And they were like, well, when we follow the recipe, our hands don't look like that. You know, the curds aren't like that on our hands. So we were like, well, let's investigate this a bit more. But the great thing about these seminars is we don't come at it from a lecture point of view, do we? We come at it like, let's get 15 cheesemakers together, let's make the cheese, different cultures, let's mature the cheese, let's taste it, and look at the data, taste the cheeses, and just try and learn together and also learn from each other. So the first one was the Wensleydales, when we made 4 batches of Wensleydales horizontally in a week. And this last month we made 8 batches of cheese, just exploring starter. Because as a nation, as a cheesemakers, we just put it in and we don't realise quite what we're doing and what potential it has.
It's like open source cheesemaking, isn't it?
I would say.
What's also great is the balance. So you have to have a good knowledge of cheesemakers, but it's great because people ask different questions. So if they're a new cheesemaker, you ask something and you go, well, I've never thought about it from that point of view. You know, so it's a lot of fun, isn't it? We just hope the cheeses taste good. So these are just a couple of experimental stuff I'll show you in here while we're in here. I might as well. These ones.
Finishing our tea, Kathy and Andy walk us into the dairy's large maturing room.
So you can see the difference between, like, these are traditional British ones that are cloth bound, and then the Calixta, which is continental style, just on the rinds really more than anything. Actually, let's take that one first.
Calixta is the cheese that we're making today. So
this is the end result of the curds that you were cutting when we arrived.
yeah, exactly that. And we don't salt these, we actually brine these ones. So a lot of traditional British cheese gets milled and salted, whereas the continental tend to have a brine.
That's amazing.
Isn't it wonderful?
It's got that hint of a kind of mountain cheese, and then it's got a real tang, a really kind of British tang that you wouldn't get from a continental cheese. Beautiful.
Oh, Kathy, that's outstanding.
Oh, thank you.
Really
It's
is.
actually a cheese that probably doesn't want to be aged too much longer than a year, because we use the full fat milk from Collins Farm. So as it breaks down, it becomes really tangy.
The cheese does reflect the seasons of the cows on different pasture and what they're eating.
If there's a really good batch, then we'll look back and go, what do we do? Do we do anything very differently on that day?
And we'll add in those details from Colin, whether it was rainy, whether they were inside, whether they were outside. But, you know, we can't replicate some of them.
They're not just making cheese, they're trying to understand it, and their cheese museum is part of that.
We have like a little, I always think like a 10-second gap in the shop to kind of sell them what is farmhouse cheese, what is raw milk cheese. But actually what I really like is that people come in here and just nosy about all the artefacts and the connection to where they're placed, really, where the food comes from.
It's not going to make them less keen to buy cheese.
No, exactly. People do want to know more. That's the nice thing about this museum, is that it's used.
There's a lot of excitement in the shop just now. We've come here to have a taste with Andy, but it's busy. There's a cheese skyscraper there that's about 7 cheeses high, I think.
Time for some more tasting. Local cheeses, some from makers who started out with the Courtyard Dairy's help.
So would you say that's quite a traditional Lancashire?
Yeah, I think it's slightly firmer than... The thing about Rogers is they do his vary more than... Because he's so small, sometimes you get it really soft, sometimes you get it quite fresh and clean like these ones are. It varies incredibly, and for most cheesemongers that'd be a challenge, but for us it's kind of actually exciting thing. And the most recent addition would be the Stonebeck, so they're incredible in the way that they farm. They only milk in the spring and the summer. That old-fashioned Dale style, they're on traditional hay meadows. What's interesting is all these first 4 cheeses are quite mellow, but for me they're a great example of a traditional northern cheese. So they're not big and brash, but they have this real smooth complexity to them, especially that one in terms of the...
From the dairy, we drive to the source of that raw organic milk for Kathy's Calixta cheese.
Hi, I'm Colin Price. This is my dad Alan, and we farm together at Longbank Farm in Keysden near Clapham, just in the edge of North Yorkshire. We're farming organic dairy cattle and sheep.
How many cows do you have here?
So we milk 40.
So 40 cows on an organic dairy farm. There's a lot of people who say that's never going to add up. You can't make a living off a herd that small.
We keep everything purebred, so and sex semen, so I'm breeding nearly all heifers. So a big part of my income is selling breeding stock to other farmers.
The grass looks in really good nick. I can just see, are those your cows through there? I can see them through the crack in the ground.
Yeah. We haven't reseeded our meadows, and a lot of them are now species-rich meadow type grass, whereas lots of like college teaching for dairy farms was, you need monoculture and fast-growing ryegrasses and all that to get lots of silage, whereas there's lots of other breeds of grass, like some people would call them a weed, but it's only a weed if you don't know what to do with it.
And if the cows are going to eat it and get happy, that's not a weed.
Yeah, they'll graze what they want, and then the sheep eat other grasses. They all mix in together, really.
In July, Colin and his father won the Tie Award from the Yorkshire Agricultural Society for commercial farms that excel in conservation across the north of England.
I think they liked it because we did a bit of everything. We've done stone walling, we've done hedge laying, we've done hedge planting, we've got solar panels, we've got a wind turbine, we've got a biomass boiler, and we've put a borehole in. We want to be self-sufficient. That was your ambition.
Tidiness as well, wasn't it?
Father and son organic farmers Alan and Colin Price. But before we leave Yorkshire, we have to head back to the cheese-making room at the Courtyard Dairy to help with what Kathy and Andy were working on when we arrived.
In the last few minutes, the curds have bound together so that you can take them out of the cheesecloth and it's holding its shape already.
I'm glad we came in for the beginning and the end. I mean, not the end, but the shaping.
When we walked in here first thing today, we saw a tank full of what still looked like milk. And as we come away a few hours later, it looks very much like cheese.
So it'll just get flipped again later on, and then I'll put them on the press.
Tomorrow, Kathy will brine the cheese. In a year, it'll be ready.
The other reason we kind of developed this style of cheese is that it requires a year for flavour to come through. And new cheesemakers very rarely develop a cheese like this because they haven't got the cash flow. It doesn't matter to us because this is part of a bigger picture, so we can wait that year. I always remember in the early days, we were so quiet, we were doing like £10 in the shop. And I was like, maybe we should change what we do, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. And Kathy was like, no, we're going to stick true to what we believe in, and it'll either work or it won't. And if it don't work, then we'll be proud we had a go, rather than trying to water down what we did. And, you know, it was her that kind of forced that in.
What would a watering down look like?
Well, for us, we were so quiet as a cheese shop that it would have been like, do we sell sandwiches? Do we sell... You know, we had a lot of people asking for cheeses we don't do, like Roquefort and Stilton and things like that. And it was like, because we were so specialist, and it's really tough when you're a new shop and you're specialist, and you're not making any money. And I think that we would have changed what we would have done. But Kathy was adamant that we didn't change and it would exist as... Yeah, exactly.
Andy and Kathy Swinscoe definitely not watered down. Back at our hotel that evening, Hugh and I mulled over what we'd seen at the Courtyard Dairy.
We've just tasted what we both agreed was one of the most delicious British cheeses, and we can't remember its name. I think that actually says a lot about the sort of modesty of what's going on in that operation. You know, they're not blowing their own trumpet. In fact, if they're blowing anyone's trumpet, it's all the other cheesemakers who they support, quite a few of which I sense wouldn't be making cheese at all if it wasn't for the support they get from the Courtyard Dairy.
Where does that leave us? Well, we don't know where it leaves us because we have 2 more visits to make.
It seems to me that Kathy and Andy are just injecting an extraordinary amount of energy and hope into the whole world of British cheese. These seminars and gatherings that they have, it's just boom, they're putting it right out there.
It is, it's like a centre of energy. I mean, we've seen it in the past, you know, like E5 Bakery in London, where you get this thinking about bread and getting together with farmers and staff then going out and starting their own bakeries. And I wouldn't be at all surprised that people who'd worked to Courtyard Dairy went off and made cheese, sold cheese.
They must be. You also get the sense that jaded or struggling British cheesemakers who might be finding life hard because of changing regulations or bad weather or difficulties in the market go there to get revitalised. Kathy and Andy are making it easier for us or boosting our confidence that we can do it. That's a wonderful thing.
I knew you were going to say
It's 8 o'clock in the morning, the Lake District. We're in a small business park on the edge of Kendal, a cluster of stone buildings that look more farm than enterprise centre. This is where Lovingly Artisan Bakery, the next business on our shortlist, is based. Both the production bakehouse and one of their shops. The other is at Altrincham Market in Manchester. There are already a few customers about and lots of staff, and the smell of bread scents a beautiful morning. Lovingly Artisan is owned by another married couple, Aidan Monks and Catherine Connor, who I realised suddenly that I've met before a few years ago in a little bread shed by Oxenholme railway station.
Sheila came to us on Oxenholme train station.
No. Well, I'd forgotten the connection.
We literally learned so much from that shelf, and that was really the backbone of who we became as retailers.
15 years ago, although sourdough bakeries were well established in London at the time, up here it wasn't, and we wanted to do a sourdough bakery, but the train station was perfect because it had the likes of yourself coming.
So, from a railway station stall to a major business selling bread across the northwest of England. How?
And then our other very, very early connection was with Andrew Wilkinson at Gilchester Organics. When we visited the farm for the first time, that's what founded our values. And it was then that whole feeling of life as the field margins just merged into the field, and birds and bees and flowers and everything. You absolutely saw the contrast, and we realised then that actually if somebody is putting this much love and skill into growing, we need to put that much care into baking.
We made a really concise decision that we wanted to be organic where and where possible.
What we want people to see is the range of sourdoughs that we have, and we always have a good selection of tasters. So we've got anything between 13 to 19 different sourdoughs. It varies slightly. Is that? Shall I tell you about that, Sheila? I'm going to tell you about this.
Sheila's been talking about this all the way up on the journey because we tasted it in London and we're a bit obsessed with it. I hope they do the dark chocolate malt and orange sourdough because maybe it's just a special and they won't have it.
The key to the chocolate bread, this is brewer's barley. There's one called chocolate malt, which is not chocolate. It's actually just very darkly roasted. And it has the characteristic of a chocolate flavour. So the little bit of real chocolate you have in that bread, as soon as you taste that, you think the whole thing's chocolate. But the truth is, most of it is actually barley.
Chocolate malt, what you'd get in a stout?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And as an ingredient, I think the generic baker's malt is a bit monotone. So to work with the different brewer's malts brings a whole different characteristic into it. It's lovely.
I was buying bread from this gentleman when he was in his other place. Yeah, when you moved here, I came, I just follow you wherever you go.
Do you live locally?
Well, I used to live in Staveley and I've moved to Stores, but I still come for my bread.
How far is that?
12 miles.
And it's worth 12 miles?
Oh, God, yeah. This bread's just... Nobody around here can beat it. It's just the most wonderful bread.
And it was £4, I noticed.
Yeah, worth every penny. I wouldn't like to try and bake it myself. It would cost me about 4,000 to try and get to it. And I look at things, see things online, how easy it isn't easy. Not to get it to this quality. Can I just make a point, please? Would you not like to open another place, start a Varnside? There's no bread shops up there.
But that's all right. We're only just up the road. It's fine.
Yes, 12 miles. But I'd be living on your doorstep if you were in Arnside.
In the bakery inside another stone shed, a lot of people. There are a few machines, some mixers, and another that divides the dough, but most of the process is being done by hand.
So this is our 5 grain.
Wonderful. This is the 5 grain loaf.
So this is the 5 grain sourdough.
Elasticity of the dough there is beautiful, isn't it?
So we've got brown and golden linseed, we've got sunflower, and we've got millet, a combination. And then also we've got rye flour and rye sour. Rye is really great because it helps the bread keep really well, so people don't realise that rye is a very natural preservative. Our mantra has always been, we want to make bread that's fit to be at the centre of the table. That's what we're about, and that's why we have the organic conversation, because we want to know that this is food that nourishes, but also in the real world it has to last. If they take that loaf of bread home and they eat the whole loaf, then they'll come back next week.
Lovingly Artisan sells around 7,000 loaves a week, plus patisserie and cakes. But they don't just bake. They now mill a good part of their grain, a development triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
When the war started in Ukraine, instantly, like everybody, we were affected. Prices went through the roof. We were largely a buyer of organic flour, so we would buy in organic white flour, we'd buy in organic ancient grains, and we didn't ask. I think the thing about local and British flour is a more recent thing that people are asking about. Is it British? Is the flour British? Whereas the truth is that the majority of the flour has come from outside the UK, so it travels a massive distance from Canada, from Australia, from all over. But in particular for the organic, it was almost all coming from Ukraine.
The mill is run by Niall, Aidan's son. When we visited at the end of summer, he was about to start milling a special organic grain called Barber wheat, developed in the United States by a company set up by chef Dan Barber to bring flavour and nutrition back into plant breeding.
What we're hoping to create, because of all of the effort that's gone into that grain, that from that we create the best wholemeal bread possible, because we think ultimately the bread that should be at the centre of the table, and how it was for thousands of years, was wholemeal bread. And all the nutrition that a family wanted, the reason it was the centre of the table, that's where they were getting their nutrition from. The nutritional density of that soil, the nutrients in that soil, that's what transfers up into that grain, and that's what's delivered.
Great flavour, great nutrition, and we discover zero waste in ways neither of us had ever considered, as we were offered a slice of cake at Lovingly's food truck, handily parked outside the mill building.
This is one of the things we created. We use all of the breadcrumbs that we have surplus back into products, and without exception what breadcrumbs do is they actually improve the quality and improve the flavour. This is a ginger and marmalade cake made with sourdough breadcrumbs.
I've heard about breadcrumbs going back in the bread, but what you've created here is a product that takes up even more of your breadcrumbs.
Yes.
It's like,
so
what percentage of that is breadcrumb?
It is breadcrumb.
It's like 90% breadcrumb.
Yes. It probably, yes, we're not dusting if you want it, but the body of it, and actually when you taste it, the texture.
And it has the texture of parking.
Yeah.
It has a really crumbly texture. Currently, we can't make enough. I said to we don't ever want to get to the point where we're actually hunting for breadcrumbs, but we are literally, when I see now if we've got 3 or 4 loaves left, my heart used to sink, and now I think, yes, more marmalade cake, because...
Are there breadcrumbs from lots of different breads in here? Or there's some that can't go in?
Yeah. We separate them.
So the cheese and chilli, the olive, the spiced apple, they become sourdough crackers.
So we slice those thinly and dry them in the oven, and then we rebag them, so they become a really beautiful new product as crackers.
And what is lovely about the journey that you might go on with certain products like the sourdough crackers is they're not available all the time, because we might not have that surplus sourdough all the time, but that adds a little bit of scarcity into the situation. If you like them, you love them, and you see them, buy them, because they might not be here tomorrow.
From the food truck, we move backwards, as it were, driving to the source of some of their grains.
Just missed the harvest, but it does mean we've got some piles of grains ready to look at.
The farm run by Yannicka and Ben Taylor, who've only recently started farming regeneratively, growing grains for Aidan and Catherine.
What's really special, I have to tell you about this location and where we are. Here, we're in the Eden Valley. They call this the Golden Mile. Yannicka has the best soil in the country.
This is one of our new grain stores. So we've just got in here some of Aidan's crops that we've just harvested the last 2 days.
Look at the size of these grains. They're so long and plump as well.
So this is the rice. It's so different from all our other crops, how tall it is. And it grows really well here. And then we've got some einkorn and some emmer, which is our first year growing it.
So what's this legume pod in here?
Yeah, we've had lots of other crops obviously growing in the field because it's no input. So now's the challenge for us. We need to put all this through the dryers, and then hopefully we'll get a lovely clean sample at the end. What drives us is the principle of doing it, because it's great fun, but it's also really important to have a sustainable farming business. It needs to be profitable, and that's one of the challenges, particularly in the arable sector at the moment. We don't have control of those outputs, so it's great for us to be able to speak to Aidan and come up with realistic prices that work for us both, and it gives us a premium, and it means we don't have to deal with the fluctuations all through the year of just being on the global markets of grain. So it is really important as well, because hopefully it gives us a more sustainable business by having a constant market, because he's got the talent of baking that he will make something off it no matter what grade it comes off, no matter what proteins it comes out. He has the knowledge and the amazing skill to make something of it.
So that takes a lot of stress and anxiety out of it. Because if you don't hit certain markers with your mainstream grains going to the big buyers, it's going to be hard to shift that grain, right?
Exactly. And that allows us to experiment a bit more as well, because we have that reassurance. We've found with making our rapeseed oil going into the food industry, there's still a disconnect between the farming industry and the food industry, of not really understanding each other, and because there's all these middle processes. So being able to bring that in-house, Aidan's been able to bring the milling in-house, we've been able to bring in the cleaning in-house. We're able to have that relationship and talk and understand each other's processes, and I think that's really important.
Farmer Yannicka Taylor. And then, from Hugh and me, more musing over what we've seen.
Another incredible producer. I mean, the whole point of our category is that if we're not tasting the best of the best, we're not in the right place. And if our decisions are not hard to make, then in a way, again, it's not where we ought to be. So this sort of dilemma is actually where we ought to be.
You're trying to figure out how they're connecting with other producers, if they're spreading their knowledge, how they're thinking about their business, how they connect their business to the bigger issues. I mean, both Andy and Kathy and Aidan and Catherine, they're clearly thinking in terms of the Ukraine war.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that we're tasting amazing bread in a Cumbrian bakery, and part of the story behind it is international events completely outside the control of either the bakers or the farmers, and yet it has shaped their thinking into a bigger picture idea about food security, food community, and that's been a really remarkable part of the day.
And also I was amazed that Aidan described this Barber wheat.
It pulls in a story from the other side of the Atlantic. It's remarkable.
Dan Barber, understood very early that he had to get in the seed business, but that has reached into Cumbria, from New York State.
Anyway, see you in Cambridge.
See you in Cambridge, yes.
Now we're in the milder climes of Cambridgeshire, arable country, on the edge of the scarily busy A1307 that divides Flourish Produce's land.
Now's our chance.
It's the most dangerous thing I've done on a farm for ages.
We run across with founder Calixta Killander.
I really like to try and take people out and see the fields. Seeing in this block here, for example, all the diversity of the things that we grow, and also the scale that we're growing on is really important. We have a really complex rotation. 2 years at a time, our land is in green manure, which is where it's basically regenerating and building fertility, restoring health after many years of arable production. And then it goes into 2 years of cash crops. We grow over 750 different varieties of cash crops. So those are vegetables, herbs, salads. We do some heritage grain, fruit, and cut flowers.
What we're looking at is, to be frank, not very lovely. Just many acres of white wool, designed, says Calixta, to keep the wildlife at bay, away from the leeks, onions and squash of many kinds, as well as about 180,000 heads of many different varieties of radicchio, the bitter vegetable that we Brits are only just beginning to love.
And we've definitely found that by trying to communicate a little bit about them and tell the story of them, it's not as much of a step as maybe it was.
And they cook quite nicely too, don't they?
Yeah.
Nice wedges in the oven, trickle with a bit of oil, roasted, bit of garlic, and they're not kale.
Exactly, something pink and different. Maybe when we're all
and not kale. Not chicory, kale. It's not kale.
Yeah, bitter is better.
Feel free to use that.
Most of the produce is sold directly to restaurants, cafes and a few shops. Some goes into veg boxes or is sold from the farm shop.
When we very first opened the farm shop just 2.5 years ago, there was lots of questions from visitors. Why didn't you have aubergines in March? Why are your tomatoes looking like this instead of being red and round? And now people come for mainly the different weird produce that we have, and that's something that really gets people excited.
If different and weird is part of what you do really well and you get chefs excited by that, do you think it's relevant to the future of farming in the UK, to food security in the long term in the UK?
There are so many very challenging issues at the moment with the future of food and with farming, and they are wrapped up with very complex issues to do with policy, to do with health and to do with climate and many other things. And I think that one thing that's at the heart of it is the idea of diversity. I think it's the key actually to so many different things. I think it's the key to healthy food systems. I think it's the key to sustainable farming. I think it's the key to healthy human beings.
You can also see the permaculture principles embedded here, perennials woven into the beds of annuals.
We were driven to do that as a result of a terrible flood that we had about 4 years ago. We watched, despite our huge efforts in adding loads of compost to our fields and using only horsepower, we watched in this horrible day all of our precious topsoil sliding down the hill. Perennials give us these deep-rooted root systems which can help create different microclimates and stabilise the soil. We've got to invest in the long-term vision, not the now.
Over the road, we find quiet in some of the gigantic polytunnels that take up about 2 acres of Flourish Produce's land.
This was the very first tunnel I built. All of the tunnels that we have now, which is 2 acres worth, they've all been borrowed, not stolen, but basically got off Facebook Marketplace. Recycled. That's a great way. Yeah, upcycled. On our farm, we start everything that we grow from seed. So we are sowing in here every week of the year to have continuous productions. It's really important for us that we can supply our customers all year round, because in turn it means we can keep our team on all year round as opposed to it being a seasonal business. We get our seeds from all over the world. So there's lots of sort of weird, wonderful things. And again, we couldn't get that stuff if we were buying in plants from commercial nurseries. In there, we have a little tray filling machine. Again, a Facebook Marketplace find. We're doing hundreds of thousands of trays a year.
You must have had to water this summer.
Yes.
So what's your irrigation setup?
So we have popped in a little borehole. We don't have like a big irrigation allowance. We use a drip irrigation in our fields. And so that means we run pipes that water exactly where the rows of plants are. They use between 20 and 30% of the water that a normal irrigation method would use. We're in a very dry part of the country. We're on light sandy loam, which has many benefits, but the big disadvantage is that when it's dry, it's very dry. This year, we are so lucky to have it, because if we hadn't had our irrigation set up in the way we have, you wouldn't be here today. We would be out of business.
Using water well is all part of soil building, with compost, green manures and grazing sheep borrowed from a neighbour. Calixta says recent tests show it's working. Their vegetables have been found to be some of the most nutritious in the country. The next polytunnel is filled way up into its high curved roof with many kinds of chilies.
Please pick whatever you'd like.
This one's just about right. Lovely orange-red colour. Hot or mild?
Hottish.
Hot-ish.
Yeah. I have a very low tolerance.
Me too. Too hot to nibble?
I would give it a go.
It's not habanero hot.
What's it called, that one? A kombucha.
A kombucha, like kombucha?
Yes.
Is there a relation? Did you make that up?
I do like to make up the names.
Okay. So what's it really called?
I don't know, I have to look it up.
We leave the chilies, mouths burning, and head for the cool of the tomatoes. Again, the variety of varieties astonishes us. Purple, green, yellow, striped, aubergine-shaped. All of them tasty.
My name's Katie. I'm the pack bar manager here at Flourish. We work with some absolutely incredible chefs, and it's pretty amazing when they send photos of the dishes that they make. It's amazing to know that they respect the produce.
I mean, you look at the list of those restaurants, and those are very, on the whole, high-end. I hate that expression. Would it work for a market that is not so committed, so knowledgeable as those chefs represented by those names on the board?
Part of what we love doing at Flourish is educating the wider demographic. So we have our veg box scheme. Feedback is so incredible when we see how excited they are about these crazy peppers or, this variety of tomato that just really jazzes up their lunch. I think it's also really important to be telling the story that regenerative farming is not cheap farming. We value the staff, we value the land. Like with all, artisan products, they cost what they cost. Bakeries, cheesemakers, all of these things, sometimes people kind of roll their eyes at how expensive they are, but that is unfortunately the world we live in. And if we want to support those small industries and to make them more available, I think we have to pay them what they're worth.
Back in the staff area, a handsomely converted barn with dried flowers hanging from the rafters above the long dining table where the staff eat, Calixta tells us how it all began.
So I had been working on organic farms in the United States, and towards the end of my time there, I was on a farm in Massachusetts run with working horses. I went to visit my family for Christmas and went to visit a friend who had working horses in Cornwall, which was very unusual. And he remarkably gave them to me, which was just an incredible life-changing opportunity. I ended up packing up my life in America and started to think about starting the farm here in the UK. I needed machinery for the horses, so I went to stay with the Amish, and they helped me source sort of old vintage machinery that we shipped over in a shipping container. And that's how we ended up breaking ground here at Flourish.
So you started with horses,
yes,
but you are now semi-mechanised. Tractors, we've seen a couple.
Yeah, that's right.
You still have horses?
Yeah, so the two working horses, Bill and Ben, they worked for a few years until they retired. Unfortunately, Ben passed away, but Bill is still alive and well, enjoying his golden years. But now we've graduated to machinery. So we use classic Massey Ferguson tractors, which are all quite small, so they're quite light on the soil, but most of the work is done still by hand.
What do you say to people who go, you're supplying high-end restaurants and, people who can afford expensive boxes? Do you argue that it can be more of a mass market thing?
It's a complex issue because essentially we are competing with supermarkets, and supermarkets are not valuing the real cost of produce. We charge the true cost of what it costs to grow something here on our farm, paying our team as well as we can, looking after our environment, of reinvesting into our ecosystem and into our soil. We try and make things as affordable as we can, but the fact is we need to stay afloat and we need to be financially sustainable. I think nutrition is another place that is really important to talk about, because we've been involved in a study recently that has proved that our produce grown on the farm within the study became second of a big group of other organic farms. So you really are getting what you pay for, I would say. I don't know if I can answer the full question of how to make things fully affordable, but I think, health is wealth, and I hope we can help people see food as a real investment in not just a delicious bite for now, but in the long term.
Calixta Killander of Flourish Produce. Never in the years I've been judging this category have three producers been so closely matched, playing the same roles in their regions. All, literally, are winners. Hugh hasn't had the same experience at the awards, but talking to him after that last visit, he shares my feeling that there really is no way to choose between the three producers we've just seen.
750 varieties, fruit, vegetables and flowers on one site. It's strange, isn't it? Because at one level it does seem quite specialised, but the growing principles underlying it really do set an example of how we need to think. Using less water, creating soil fertility with green manures, no application of fossil fuel-based fertilisers, and they're raising these extraordinarily abundant crops. I mean, there's got to be some learnings there that are exportable and scalable to the wider farming industry.
What hits us both is how all three finalists are at the heart of what could be, or becoming, strong regional food webs, creating resilience when shortages occur on a bigger scale. And that's the solution, or one of the solutions, to food insecurity that's deep in Tim Lagg's report. But these are all companies making what many people would describe as high-end food, too expensive for millions. Does that negate what they're doing?
I think, and actually I hope, there's a comparison with renewable energy here, which seemed kind of niche and almost elitist, and electric cars. And now it's rolling out as the most inexpensive, no-brainer form of energy. And if regenerative agriculture can reach the same tipping point where more and more farmers say, that farm over there is having amazing results with no fossil fuel fertilizers because of the way they're looking after their soil in a different way. Or that farm over there has reduced the need for water by 70%. And people just start thinking of it as they're actually doing it for commercial reasons. But the learnings have to start somewhere. They have to start with pioneers, people who are going out on a limb and doing things differently. And if the way they succeed in doing that is by starting off in a relatively wealthy or high-end market, that's okay, because the learnings will come out of that will apply far wider across the board and may change the future of British agriculture.
I'm reminded of the beginning of the Real Bread campaign, and I was so sceptical. And if you think of some of the little bakeries in highly unlikely places, with low income like Barrow-in-Furness, where those principles, and it was scoffed at as sourdough and posh people and all that, it has changed the bread landscape.
All of these amazing producers feel like change makers, risk takers and change makers. They are making a difference and we should really get behind them.
Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall. How do we choose a winner from that trio? Well, find out November 18th at the BBC Food and Farming Awards ceremony, this year being held in Bristol, where it will, of course, be recorded for broadcast.
Hello there, I'm John Kay, and I just wanted to tell you there's an update in my true crime investigation, Fairy Meadow, which tells the story of a little girl called Cheryl Grimmer. She vanished from Fairy Meadow Beach in Australia more than 50 years ago. Our podcast from BBC Radio 4 has had hundreds of emails from listeners, including potential witnesses who think they might have important information. So in our new episode, I hear their stories and find out what response they've had from police. And we catch up with Cheryl's family as they step up their campaign for justice. Subscribe to Fairy Meadow on BBC Sounds.